Right, well, good evening to you, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this Snickleways walk. My name is Warwick, if you've not gathered, and I'm going to take you around the Snickleways this evening. And if you're wondering what a Snickleway is, you will soon find out. A Snickleway is a York word. It's only found in York, and it refers to these little alleys and passages that abound within the city. The term was made up by a man called Mark Jones. So let's start round the corner. Now, within the walls of York, there's about 50, 60, 70 Snickleways. Well, I don't know how many hours you've got, but we're not going to go down that lot. A short selection this evening of about 20, which will take us up till about 9:15. I will try and avoid losing you on this tour, but towards the end of the tour, I will deliberately try and lose everybody. But you'll be given due warning of that. So away we go. And if you're strangers to York, you'll find it very confusing that all the streets here are called gates, all the gates are bars, and all the bars are pubs. So when you see gate, it doesn't mean gate that opens, it means gata. It's from the Scandinavian word gata, meaning a street. When you see a bar, Bootham Bar, it doesn't mean a drinking place, it means a barrier or defence, because it was literally a wooden barrier across the road. And so we're going to go in through Bootham Bar, which is one of the medieval gateways of York. There's a gate street name, Petergate, and in a moment you're going to see the first Snickleway called the Hole in the Wall, which is a ginnel through a building by the pub of that name. So let's follow, if you'd follow me, our first Snickleway proper. It's called the Hole in the Wall. You may have noticed it on the pub. And we've now passed through that wall, through a little gateway or hole in the wall, into the Minster enclosure. The second explanation is that this pub behind us is on the site of the medieval prison of the Minster Precinct, and the people who were imprisoned in there were not fed. So they had to beg through a little window or hole in the wall to get food from passers-by. The third explanation is that further down there was yet another prison. They were taken and put in this prison in a very, very small cell or hole in the wall and bricked up alive. Right, well, we're now about to go down Stonegate, and in the Middle Ages this is meant to be where the stone was brought from the river to build York Minster. I don't know if you've heard the definition of a Yorkshireman. It's a Scotsman stripped of his generosity. None of you Scots, are you? There are no Scots amongst you, dear, because you know in York it's still legal to shoot a Scotsman on sight, provided you use a crossbow. It's an old law that's never been altered from the days when England and Scotland were at war. So in other words, shoot first and ask questions later. Well, here's the next Snickleway. It's called Coffee Yard, and so called because York's first coffee house opened down there in about 1670. And it's a fascinating little Snickleway twisting through several buildings. So let's head off down Coffee Yard. Its medieval title was the Hostel of Nostell Priory, which is quite a mouthful to say when you've had a few drinks, but unfortunately I've had none so far, so I can say it, Hostel of Nostell Priory. In other words, it was a monastic hotel, so that the monks from Nostell, which is near Wakefield, when they visited York, should stay here and not go roaming the town at night in search of the exotic nightlife. So the whole complex went into disrepair, and people started using the hall passageway as a shortcut. So right of way grew up through somebody's hall passage, and I don't know whether you'd like people coming through your hall passage all day, all night, trampling through and doing what people do in passages. You might like to linger in the passage and look through the glass panels, because you'll see this building, which appears to be brand new from the outside, is in fact about 1/4 original. You can see some of the old timber here. You've now emerged into a street called Swinegate, which takes its name from York's pig market, which was down here. But this street here, this Snickleway here, is called Grape Lane, and you may think that that's something to do with fruit. So in other words, this was the medieval red light district, and it was run by the church. Now, on this corner here was a rather poor quality rundown church called St Benet's, long since vanished, which owned a lot of rundown cottages down here, including ones like this, and these were rented out to ladies who were alewives, who would brew beer by day, and at night they'd retire upstairs and wait for visitors. And so it was all very conveniently close for York Minster and all those unmarried clergy living in and around it. Anyway, we're now off on our way to a Snickleway with the most unbelievable mouthful of a name, Nether Pot Lane. and this was the cattle market, St Sampson's Square or Thursday Market. Anyway, the horn is the horns of cattle which were taken down here and made into things. And you can think of many English words with horn in them that were derived from horns that were worked from cattle. So you think of horns that you blew on, horns that you drank from, horn-rimmed glasses, shoe horns, ink horns, powder horns, lanthorns. All of these things were made of horn. And they would tip the rubbish then in a pot hole. So it's the lower of the two lanes where the horn workers threw their rubbish in a pot hole, or Nether Hornpot Lane for short. So what a mouthful. Now here you can see a pub called the Roman Bath, which looks quite new. It's on top of one of the oldest buildings in York, the Roman Bath. But we're now going to go down this Snickle Way here with this peculiar name of Finkl Street. And the idea is that they were always connected with marketplaces, and they went round a corner so that the beasts leaving the market shouldn't stampede. They had to slow down as they went out. The other name for it is Mucky Pig Lane, after the dirty pig market, and an alternative title for it was Mucky Pig Lane, after a dirty woman who lived down here. So I think you can draw your own conclusions. Well, we're now going to leave the marketplace and head off down Mucky Pig Lane. Right, do come round the corner, and it says in the Bible your giving shall be in secret, but there's no secret as to the people who donated money to this mission hall, because all their initials are put up on bricks. Well, this is Mad Alice Lane. In 1823 she poisoned her husband's dinner because he ill-treated her, and so when she was put on trial for murder she claimed that she was temporarily insane at the time that she did it.
There's a real difference between daytime and this hour, isn't there?
It's a lot quieter now. York people, on the whole, have gone home. You know, because in the day, a lot of the people you see roaming around are actually York people shopping and going about their business, you see. But at 5 o'clock, they all go home to the suburbs. That's where most of us live.
Right.
And then, of course, a lot of people are eating their dinner at this time, or going to the theatre, or knackered, or, you know, whatever. So they disappear. But by now, the city will begin to liven up a little bit. Now this row of cottages here that we're about to walk past is the oldest in York, put up in 1316, and you'll see the ground floor is ridiculously low, and that's because it is the ground has risen round it. Well, this funny little arch that we're now stood under was one of the gateways of the Minster Precinct, and this is the only one surviving, with big doors across here to keep the clergy in and the loose women of the town out. Just had narrow little slit-like windows so that the priest shouldn't climb out or let any friends in. Now the street here that runs past it is called College Street or Vicar's Lane, but its other old name is Little Alice Lane. We don't know who Little Alice was, but we think she was perhaps a friend of theirs so slim that she could slip in through the windows and make them a cup of tea at night. So let's head off into the Minster Precinct and past St William's College. And as you're round the corner here, you'll get one of the best views of York Minster in the city. But in Roman times, this was a major Roman road, the Via Decumana, which ran straight through the city on its way from Tadcaster to Malton. This was the A64 in years gone by. Don't be deceived by the cobbles, they're quite modern. The Roman road, of course, is 10, 12, 15 feet down. You might call it the Close. Its proper name is Minster Yard, but in another city it might be called a Close. Well, this is the back here of the Treasurer's house, which is mainly a 17th century mansion now. Now, you'll have seen the ghost walks going round tonight. I don't, on the whole, tell ghost stories. I have a commercial arrangement with the ghost walks. I don't tell ghost stories, and they don't tell the truth. A very strange Snickle Way name, Ogle Firth. And by now you probably think it's to do with ogling women, but it's nothing of the sort. Ogle Firth is Scandinavian, and when we get the Swedes on the walk, they say, oh yes, Ogle Firth, we know what that means, because in Swedish it means owl ford, the ford of the owls. Well, there's the next Snickle Way name, Bedern. Bedern has nothing to do with beds, it means a house of prayer, because it was the residence of more York clergy. But being the York clergy, a lot of things other than prayer went on in here. So this was built for the men called the Vicar's Choral, or the singing vicars as I used to call them, the men who used to sing the Minster services. And they had a reputation for colourful nocturnal habits. So the Dean, if you recall, had the window looking straight into Grape Lane, so he could see what they was getting up to at night, so he decided to stop it. So he built them this gateway and a courtyard with a chapel and a dining hall and houses round a courtyard to stop them getting out at night. So until about 10 years ago, this whole area was run down industrial premises and slums, but you'll see that it's been very attractively redeveloped now. But until 10 years ago, this building here was used as the warehouse of a pork pie factory. And people sometimes say, what did you want a warehouse for pork pies for? Well, the answer is simple. They were kept in here until they were stale enough to put in the British Rail Buffy cars. Terrible, isn't it? Anyway, away we go. There's quite a lot of them are renovated old, as you'll see, like this one poking up.
But many are brand new, built
These
in the old
are.
style.
Well, they're sort of built in a modern version of the old style, if you see what I mean. They were deliberately all built different so that they could tone in, and they also sold different plots off to different developers so that no one developer could put his imprint on the whole area so that it looks nice and varied. But there's an old building that's being renovated straight ahead of you. So it's a mixture of old and new. And if you look back, you'll see what an attractive development it is, and particularly how the Minster has been framed by it. Now this little snickleway we're about to go down is called Penny Lane. It's nothing to do with the Beatles or money or Liverpool. It's a corruption of Spen Lane, which is a corruption of Aspen Lane, which means the street of the ash trees, because this too was all overgrown and wooded in Viking times. This church here, it is said in York that there was a monastery for every day of the week, a church for every week of the year, and a pub for every day of the year. Though it is a church now, again, from the 16th to the 20th century, it was used for other purposes. It was used as a slaughterhouse. It was used as a workhouse where the idle poor were whipped and then set to work. It was used as a school. And in the early 18th century, it was used as a bawdy house. And the former chancel, the lower part to the right, was used as a stable. Well, we're now entering a street called the Shambles, which was the street of the butchers. It's the street of the knick-knack shops now. But let's go down a little further where I can explain the origin of the word. Shambles is York's most famous street, usually very crowded, but you're seeing it at its best this evening. So the cattle and pigs and sheep from the market were brought down here for slaughter, where those people are going. And you'll see that that snickleway is very narrow. That's so the beast shouldn't struggle as it went to its death. They then dragged the carcass out into the street and lay it on these benches, which in Old English are called Fleischschemels. But this is the point where we do what the book calls the Shambles in and out, which is where we weave in and out of 5 snickleways in rapid succession. And you've got to try and keep up with this. And knowing how litigious you are in the States, you are now hereby warned that there are nasty bollards or poles in the middle which you could easily walk into. And while I have public liability insurance, I have no responsibility for any death or injury or damage to expensive equipment that might result from going down these snickleways. In other words, take care of yourself and don't trip. So we're going to weave in and out of 5 snickleways in rapid succession and end up at the bottom of the Shambles on Whipma Gate. We're in St Crux Passage. You might wonder how on earth York had so many churches. Can you see there's one here and there's one just up there, one on every street corner. Well, in the Middle Ages York was a big city with a population of about 20,000, and 50 churches amongst 20,000 is 400 people per church. And it leads down to this incredibly named street called Whipma Gate. Call this a street because it was York's shortest street but had its longest name. So let's go down and have a look at Whipma Gate. Well, now we've got a few more snickleways up our sleeve, unless you're too tired to continue or ready to drop. We've got room for a few more. So we're now off to Black Horse Passage, which lies over here. It's called Black Horse Passage, and it was black by name and black by nature, because in the 19th century this area behind you was an area of slums. It was an area of crime, poverty and vice. And this snickleway and its continuation was a shortcut from Fossgate and Warmgate with their 28 pubs in a row to other places that lay down here. Again, men were nipping down the back to avoid being seen. So the more respectable inhabitants who lived behind us had these big brick walls put up so they couldn't see or hear all the naughty goings on down Black Horse Passage. Though as you go down, you'll see some of them were peeping toms because they've put little windows in to look through. In origin, it'll go back to Viking times. It'll be 1,000 years old, but as you see it now, it's mid-19th century. It's like most of them, it goes back 1,000 or more years, but rebuilt, rebuilt, rebuilt.
Other walking tours as well?
Oh yes, this is the third one today.
Oh wow. So is this your full-time occupation?
It is, yes. It's the third walk I've done. The morning was Saints and Sinners of York, and then this afternoon I did a tour of the Minster. So yes, it's my full-time job, and I employ other guides to help me as well.
Is this your company?
Yes.
Oh, great.
I'm the boss.
Very good.
What it counts. Well, this is Lady Pecket's yard, and you'll be shocked to know that Lady Pecket was respectable, the only respectable woman on the walk. And she was wife of a Lord Mayor of York, and she lived in the brick house at the bottom here. Now, it was York custom in those days, in the 18th century, that he was lord for a year and a day, but she was lady for ever and aye. So the Lady Mayoress kept her title for life. Now then, the Shambles was narrow, but this is narrower. And you can imagine that if the two houses overhung as much as the one on the right, they would touch eaves, which means that somebody could look in your bedroom this far away and watch you getting dressed. Not much privacy. Not much air or light would get into your house, and the stench from the street would be kept in. And what's worse is if fire broke out, it would rapidly leap across the street and burn your neighbour's house down. So in 1644, after the Great Siege of York in the English Civil War, the building regulations were changed, and all new housing or repairs had to be of brick and straight up without the overhang like the one behind you. Now, as we leave the Snickleway, you might like to turn at the top of the stairs and look back down, because it's a most picturesque view. And you'll have noticed, I'm sure by now, that each of the Snickleways has a lamp in it, an imitation gas lamp. And these are provided by the York Civic Trust. And they mean that the Snickleways are actually very brightly lit at night and actually quite safe to come down. Anyway, we're now going to leave this, the last but one Snickleway, and as I say, do turn and look back. It's a most picturesque view down the hill. Well, we're now very near our finishing place, and we're going to finish by the fountain. But if you want the loo, please don't use the fountain, use this. This is the public lavatory, which is rather rudely known in York as Splash Palace. Well, now we're now going to head up past the Church of All Saints pavement with its handsome lantern tower, which in years gone by had a lamp fixed in it to guide travellers into the city through the marshes and forests that surrounded York. And I'm now going to divide you into two groups for the last Snickleway. I'm going to send the gents down that one, and the ladies are coming down another one with me. And perhaps you'll never meet again, who knows? You live in hope. So the gentlemen down there, the ladies with me down this one. And the gentlemen might like to look at the one the ladies came down, which is the narrowest of the York Snickleways, which is known as Introduction Lane. Said if you came down it in opposite directions, you could get closely acquainted. These Snickleways, if you've not realised, are in fact the alleys of Viking York. If you've been in the Warwick Centre, which I think many of you have, you'll have realised how disgustingly dirty Viking York was, with narrow alleys running between thatched houses running with sewage. And these Snickleways are the descendants of those alleyways. And this is why so many of them have these Scandinavian names. And were you to dig down here 10-15 feet, you'd find the Viking levels like they did at the Warwick Centre. The ground has risen and the Snickleways have risen with them, if you see what I mean. So these Snickleways have Viking ancestors many feet down. Well, we're now almost finished. We're just going to go round the corner to Parliament Street, where we shall finish near that fountain. There is limited access for cars, but on the whole they're free of cars, so it's very pleasant to walk around.
And has it been a revolutionary success? Everybody happy about it?
Well, not everybody. The taxi drivers didn't like it, but on the whole it's improved the city centre, so people realise it's actually done York a lot of good. Well, now we've now finished. We're now only 2 or 3 minutes walk from where we started. There's the Minster, there's Finkl Street. You spent the whole night going round in circles getting nowhere. The furthest we ever got from where we started, which is 3 minutes walk away, was Lady Pecket's yard, 3 minutes that way. So 2 hours to go nowhere. Anyway, I hope you've enjoyed the walk round. A light-hearted look at York, and if you have, please recommend the tour, and perhaps you'll come back on one of the other tours that I do. And if you've looked at the leaflet, you'll see there's walls tours and all sorts of different tours on offer. The final thing I've got to do is to, apart from making sure you know where you are before I leave you, is to write out your Snickleways certificates to prove that you've done the walk. So if you'd like to come to my desk here, I shall write one out for you. So we'll start with you on the left if you want one.